1 year with sudden deterioration of vision in the right eye since last week. She was non-diabetic, non-hypertensive, no history of ischemic heart disease. She had history of 2 episodes of hematemesis around 3 months ago, and there were multiple papular skin lesions in axillary region. Her mother was also hypertensive. She also had the same skin lesions and history of hematemesis, and both of her parents were first cousins. The best corrected visual acuity in the right eye was 636 and 6 by 18 in the left. Both of her corneas were ectatic, and on the examination of the posterior segment, there were narrow grayish jagged lines radiating from the disc into the periphery and passing through the fovea with multiple atrophic scars. On physical examination, she also had plucked chicken appearance in the axillary region. This is the fundus photograph, which shows multiple gray lines which are passing from the disc into the periphery and both of the macula. The streak is crossing through both of the fovea, and there is associated hemorrhage in the right eye as well. This is the OCT macula of the patient, which shows there is slight loss of the foveal contour in the right eye with hyporeflective space just underneath the fovea, which is raising the neurosensory retina, and hyperreflective lesion just nasal to it with pachychoroid. The thickness, the CMT is also increased to 384, and there is loss of the foveal contour with a hyperreflective foci in the left eye. This is the blue autofluorescent image, which shows the red and gray lines which we saw in the color fundus photograph now appear hypoautofluorescent on this. She was diagnosed as a case of phalangoid streaks and was advised a loading dose of monthly 3 intraocular Avastin in the right eye, and also referred to the cornea clinic where she was advised CXL in the left eye. This is after the 3 doses of Avastin, in which we can see the foveal contour has returned to normal. The hyporeflective space has gone. The hyperreflective space, which represents the scarring of the RP and Brooks membrane and the pachychoroid, is still there, and CMT has reduced from 384 to 223. The left eye is unchanged. This is the OCT angio of the macula, which shows hyperreflective lesions in the area of the fovea at the level of the choriocapillaris. She was kept on close monitoring and called for follow-up after every 3 months, in which OCT was repeated again to check any leak. This is the wide field fundus picture, which shows multiple gray lines with fibrous proliferation radiating from the disc into the periphery. In both eyes, it is passing through the fovea with multiple atrophic scars in the mid-periphery and periphery. Her final vision was 6 by 12 partial in the right eye and 618 in the left eye. She was also advised CXL in the right eye as well and referred to a dermatologist and gastroenterologist, and she was diagnosed as a case of pseudoxanthoma elasticum on skin biopsy. Now the case discussion. Injured streaks were first described by Doyne in 1889, who described them as irregular peripapillary jagged lines. However, in 1917, Koffler correctly determined that they represented changes at the level of the Brooks membrane. Basically, Brooks membrane acts as a barrier between the choriocapillaris and the RPE, and there is a defect in the gene called ABCC6 gene, which results in the calcification of the Brooks membrane, which becomes brittle, and there are multiple defects, and it results in the compromise of the retina RPE barrier. Now, these lines may appear as narrow jagged lines which can resemble blood vessels. They are normally cruciate in pattern, they progress with time, subretinal in location, and they have a tendency to involve the macula. Associated features include purity or orange appearance of the fundus, might be associated with drusen's, and there is peripapillary chorioretinal degenerations. Complications include CNV, which is most common and serious complication, macular degenerations, traumatic membranes rupture, and RPE tears. Systemic associations include pseudoxanthoma elasticum, Paget's disease, hemoglobinopathies. 50% cases can be idiopathic. Our patient had pseudoxanthoma elasticum. In this, there is systemic elastic fiber abnormalities with secondary calcification, and it can affect skin, eyes, heart, and GI system. Ocular investigations include autofluorescence, in which the streaks appear hypoautofluorescent. On FFA, because of loss of RPE, there is window defect with late staining, and OCT detects breaks in the Brooks membrane, which can result in CNV. Here we can see the streaks which appear hypoautofluorescent, and optic disc drusen's appear hyperautofluorescent. Here we can see there is in the early phases, FFA shows streaks as hyperfluorescent and with staining in the late phases. And in case of leakage, there is hyperautofluorescence. Now, the OCT shows multiple breaks in the Brooks membrane along with a localized PED and cystic intraretinal spaces. Systemic investigations are usually done to find the systemic cause. Now, if the streaks are not involving the macula, in case of absence of any complication, we can simply observe the patient. We can counsel him to monitor his vision with the use of amstelrate, to use polycarbonate glasses and avoid any contact sports. In case of CNV as another case, we can advise him anti-VEGFs, photodynamic therapy, and laser photocoagulation. Anti-VEGFs improve or stabilize the visual acuity, and they stop the activity of CNV without forming a scar. They might be given alone or in combination with PDT. Most commonly, we use bevacizumab and aflibercept in our setup. Photodynamic therapy is used for the treatment of subfoveal CNV. It can be used alone or in combination with anti-VEGFs. Laser photocoagulation, because of its side effects, are now not being currently used. Take-home message is, if there is no visual symptom, we can simply observe the patient and we can counsel him to monitor his vision with the use of amstelrate. Investigations should be done to find out any systemic cause. And in case of complications, early treatment and close monitoring should be done. Thank you.
Maryam Shamim.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Dr. Nooralain and I am a postgraduate resident at Mughal Eye Hospital, Lahore. And today I will be discussing about familial footprints in the retina, an insight case of exudative retinopathy. So my patient was this 35-year-old lady, resident of Lahore, married and had 2 children, who presented to us in OPD on July 3rd, 2024 with a presenting complaint of decrease of vision in both eyes for the past few years. Probing into the history revealed that she had a history of trauma with stone in the left eye at 15 years of age, which was followed by sudden drop of vision in the left eye. However, the decrease of vision in the right eye was gradual in onset, not associated with pain, and no history of trauma to the right eye. My patient was born at term via normal vaginal delivery at a basic health unit with normal birth weight and no history of oxygen therapy and no postnatal hospital stay. Medical history was unremarkable. Surgical history was unremarkable. Drug history was also unremarkable. However, the history of trauma showed that at 15 years of age, she had trauma to the left eye with stone, followed by decrease of vision in the left eye, for which she did not consult any ophthalmologist at that time. Family history revealed that her grandfather had similar visual complaints. My patient was a non-smoker, non-addict with a normal appetite and a sleep-wake cycle. So when we did the examination of the patient, the visual acuity as well as the best corrected visual acuity of the right eye was counting finger, while that of the left eye was hand movements. All the interior segment finding was within normal limit, except for there was the presence of traumatic mydriasis in the left eye, while pupils of the right eye was regular, round and reactive. Posterior subcapsular cataract was present in the right eye of the patient and a Grin's traumatic cataract was present in the left eye of the patient. Vitreous condensation was noted in the right eye, however, no view of the fundus or the vitreous could be seen because of the traumatic dense cataract. When we did the fundus examination of the right eye, we could see the presence of this fibrovascular tractional band that was causing dragging and straightening of retinal vasculature and an avascular peripheral retina. B-scan of the patient was done, and in this picture you can see the presence of fibrotic tractional band that is attached to the optic disc of the right eye. A similar fibrotic band was seen attached at the disc of the left eye, for which no fundus view was present. OCT macula of the right eye was done, which showed disrupted foveal contours with elevation of macula and an epiretinal membrane formation. This is the red-free fundus photograph of the right eye, which shows the highlighting of tractional band. Fundus fluorescein angiogram of the right eye was done, which showed late staining of the fibrous tissue, as you can see in this third picture. So on the basis of history, clinical examination, and the investigation that we did, we came to the differential diagnosis of familial exudative vitreoretinopathy, retinopathy of prematurity, Norie's disease, persistent fetal vasculature, or incontinentia pigmenti. So because of the absence of oxygen therapy at birth and a normal birth weight, and the patient was born at term, the diagnosis of retinopathy of prematurity was ruled out. Norie's disease was also ruled out as my patient had no systemic associations like a developmental delay or deafness. There was no microphthalmia, no corneal opacity, so it was also ruled out. Persistent fetal vasculature was also ruled out as persistent fetal vasculature is normally unilateral, but my patient had a bilateral disease. Along with that, there is a stalk of vasculature attached to the posterior lens surface, which was not present in our patient. So persistent fetal vasculature was also ruled out. As there was no dermatological involvement in my patient, so incontinentia pigmenti was also ruled out. So on the basis of absence of oxygen therapy, a normal birth history, bilaterality of the disease in my patient, and the presence of a fibrotic band emerging from the disc causing tractional pull at the macula with dragging and straightening of the retinal vasculature and a 360-degree peripheral retinal avascularity, a diagnosis of familial exudative vitreoretinopathy was made. FEVR, also known as Kreswik-Sheepan syndrome, is a rare group of inherited retinal diseases characterized by abnormal retinal angiogenesis, leading to incomplete vascularization of peripheral retina with subsequent retinal ischemia. This disease could be inherited as an autosomal dominant, autosomal recessive, or an X-linked recessive fashion. And up till now, 11 mutations in 11 genes have been identified for FEVR. According to the gradings of it, as my patient had an extra retinal vascularization without exudation, so she had a grade 2A FEVR. In management, we did the right eye phacoemulsification for posterior subcapsular cataract extraction was done, followed by a prophylactic pan-retinal photocoagulation after the eye was coagulated following surgery. For the left eye, as there was traumatic cataract since 15 years of age, so extracapsular cataract extraction was advised under guarded prognosis. My patient presented last week with a follow-up and a best corrected visual acuity in the right eye being 636 after the cataract extraction was done and 636 partial for the left eye. So the take-home message from my presentation is familial exudative vitreoretinopathy, although frequently is underdiagnosed due to its variable presentation. Patient with history of vision loss born at term with no oxygen therapy should be thoroughly examined, as early detection and prompt intervention can preserve vision and mitigate complications. These are the references to my presentation. Thank you so much.